Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and with me is my cohort in crime, Judge Ray Jaffe. So, Ray, how you doing?
I'm doing great, John. Back together again. Exciting, big excitement here. Week 3 in the books of preseason. It's all gravy from here. Let's get it going.
Yeah, I'm getting excited. I'm gearing up for some other drafts, and the reality is hitting that football is back. So obviously I'm a big fan, and both fantasy and real football. So I can't wait, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be an interesting fall. So for those of you, tens and tens of loyal listeners out there, Jen Struder, who has been hosting the show for the past couple of weeks, looks like it's just going to be Ray, Jumpin' John, and the Judge for the foreseeable future. So we wish Jen the best in her endeavors, and so it's the Ray and John show. So
the Ray and John show, just like it was last year when we took the fantasy football world by storm.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly, and so I'm excited. I think we can do it justice, right? So let's get going, and we're going to start breaking right into some news. And I'm trying to think of we should start off with, but I'm going to start off with Eagles talk since we are noted Eagles homers. And Nick Foles, I mean, the kid's looking good. He was 12 for 19 for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception in Game 3, and he's just, Mike Vick will start the season, but will he finish it? That's the big question. So, Nick Foles, what do you think about him, Ray?
He's looked great. He's been really one of the surprises of camp. He's looked very good, obviously playing a lot more than anyone expected he would because Mike Kafka gets hurt. Michael Vick continues to get banged up. It's interesting, as you go into fantasy and your fantasy drafts, and, this is like prime draft season right now. A lot of people have had their drafts. This week might be the biggest week for drafts as sort of people want to wait, make sure all the injuries are cleared, and everyone's good to go. But, he's shown enough that you have to think about if you draft Vic, if you have a real deep league, do you actually draft Nick Foles as a possible handcuff? You have to make the decision of whether you'd have a Nick Foles as a handcuff or maybe a deep QB2, QB3. Who would be the better player? There's kind of decisions you have to think about at draft time.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking, Ray, as some of you may know, if you've been to our website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com, we had our league draft for the site on Saturday night. And I don't know if Nick Foles was drafted. I'm going to have to go back in. I don't remember him being thrown out there. And I don't know either.
We'll have to get our crack staff to work on that. But I don't know that he was drafted. I will say someone did, and we'll talk about a little bit. There was a few rookie quarterbacks drafted, one who also is making the news here, John.
Let's see. Let me read your mind on that one. Would that be Russell Wilson?
Wonderful. The great jump in, Karnak, yes, exactly. Russell Wilson. How about that? I mean, they pay the money to Matt Flynn, and lo and behold, we've been. I'm going to sprain my shoulder patting ourselves on the back, but we've been sort of talking up Russell Wilson since our first show of the season a few weeks ago. And he's just done nothing but get. It's the same story out of Wisconsin. He looked great. He's a little engine that could. He just did it all at Wisconsin. They signed Matt Flynn, Seattle does, for the big dollars, and lo and behold, Russell Wilson.
Well, that's true. We've been talking about him, and I will admit that I did think Matt Flynn would start the year, basically just for the money they paid him. They expected him to be the starter, but was really looking at Russell Wilson to come in at some point. But they're not. What the money they're paying Matt Flynn, they're paying him as a top flight backup, low level starter. So it's not like they've invested $13 million in him for the year. I think it's like $5 or $6 million they have, which it's not like Kyle Orton. I think getting $5 million down in Dallas, and with the new cap on rookies that they've instilled in the NFL, you combine their salaries and they're still getting paid less than one top flight quarterback. It's not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I agree. They didn't break the bank for Flynn. That probably made the decision easier. And I brought it up, John, because to the point you made with Nick Foles, with the Eagles, that's that you think about. Well, if you have Mike Vick as your QB1, do you draft a Nick Foles or do you draft someone like a Russell Wilson? If Vick gets hurt, would you rather have Wilson? Would you rather have Foles?
Well, I'll answer that by who has the better weapons. And right now, I think it's unquestionably the Eagles have the better weapons. So I think you would want to have Nick Foles. But having said that, if you have a quarterback that's in rhythm with his offense, having played X number of games with him, then obviously that also gives him a leg up. So it's a tough call. But I think I would still rather have Foles. But, we'll have to see how Wilson looks throughout the year.
Yeah, it's what makes it such an interesting, which makes fantasy great. You got to make these calls.
Now, one thing we have to look at, though, and obviously it'll play out throughout the year. Last year, everyone, I think, thought that the defenses would take advantage of the lockout, and the defenses would be better than the offenses. And actually, it was the opposite. There's a lot of vanilla defensive schemes. The offenses look great at the beginning of the year, and then they kind of tailored off. And I think you see that in even some of Cam Newton's numbers. He set the world on fire the first 8 games. Then his last 8 games, he fell back down to earth a little bit. So I'm wondering if with all the hype of the rookies from last year, if this preseason you didn't see all the big packages, the blitz packages, the mixed coverages that they're going to have. And I'm wondering if that kind of improved the look of some of these young quarterbacks. And kind of, it's not misguided, but you know what I'm trying to get at. They may not start off as well once the regular games start as they looked in the preseason. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that might be.
Yeah, well, I think Newton last year, he set the world on fire. He made even his staunchest doubters, of which, frankly, I was one for a while. He made believers out of anybody. He did come down to earth a little bit. I think, it's funny when you look at rookie quarterbacks and even second-year quarterbacks, and the league just continues to get more and more first, second-year quarterbacks starting. I probably attributed to high school and college systems getting much more pro-like offenses. But, the first-year quarterbacks that, from a fantasy perspective, are the ones that'll run the ball. So first year out of the gate, I would expect an RG3, frankly, to outscore an Andrew Luck just because he can get so many points with his legs. Has that 50, 60 yards a game rushing. In a standard league, that's like another 150 yards passing. So it's a huge, it bridges the gap tremendously and really puts him out in front. Russell Wilson could be the same way. Your more traditional passers, while they might have better pure passing numbers, probably won't put up the same type of fantasy stats first year or two in.
Now, that's a great point to remind everyone about the running yards versus the passing yards, because it is a huge advantage to a quarterback who can either scramble or design runs, a la Tim Tebow. You look back at him, and we did talk extensively about him last year, we'd have to go back and do a little bit of research, but the majority of his points were rushing points. So it's definitely something to keep in mind about these types of quarterbacks, the ones that scramble a little better and maybe do design runs. So, but it's still obviously, in fantasy, points is points. So any way you can get them, it's a great, it's a great thing for you. So just play, prepare for that in the season, and you'll be good. I'll tell you, one other bit of Seattle news is T.O. was cut. And I think there are many tears that are going to be shed over this around here. What do you think, Ray?
Well, it's funny. So excited to have Seattle, maybe less from a fantasy perspective, but more from just a making the news perspective with T.O. and Braylon Edwards and all that's going on there. But no, it didn't work out for T.O. He's cut. And I can't help think if some part of that is with naming Russell Wilson the starter, the young guy, maybe it's the kind of thing where they just don't need that kind of influence on the team. They're going to start him fresh. They're going to start him with some young guys he can grow with.
Yeah, it was. There's the word was there's a lot of complaining coming out of him, and it's true. Not that Russell Wilson is impressionable, but that you just don't want. You're right, that kind of influence around your team. And I think you may even seen that in maybe some of the moves Miami's made, just with Tannehill in there. That you kind of want a fresh start, and you want to get rid of some of that riffraff. So again, for those who haven't heard, T.O. has been cut.
I think Joe is hurt. Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me, is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Down goes Owens. Down goes Owens.
And of course, that brings the question: is his career over?
You'd have to think so. Well, you know what? Talking strictly from a fantasy football perspective, his career is over. Whether he latches on somewhere as, maybe a specialist third down receiver or something, who knows? But I think, from a fantasy relevance perspective, it's probably the end of the line for T.O.
And I would think there's definitely the possibility, he's still in great shape, supposedly, that he may get another chance this year, but I think effectively his career's over as well, because just people, don't want the headache. So, anyhow, that's T.O. So, I'll tell you what, let's go with one more bit of wide receiver news, and we've got a lot of running backs to talk about. We'll do that after the break, but Mike Wallace reported to the team. He can't practice yet. He needs a 3-day grace period. But Mike Wallace is back with the Steelers, so impact for Mike Wallace joining with the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, big news. I mean, Mike Wallace is a legitimate fantasy player. Really a wide receiver one in a big league. Certainly, first half of last year, he did tail off a little bit. Maybe he's a real strong wide receiver two this year. As Antonio Brown really continues to emerge there. But, good news for Steelers fans and for fantasy fans that drafted Wallace earlier in the year, if they had their draft sort of while the holdout was going on. I don't know that it's a huge surprise. The reality of it is I think he sort of was, he's not happy with his contract. He also was happy to take a couple games off from the preseason, but back in the fold. And, look for Wallace and Brown to be a dangerous pair of receivers this year.
I definitely am looking for that, and I'm maybe looking for a little bit more for Antonio Brown as I drafted him, and I've been touting him on the show, and we'll get into our draft again a little bit later. But I decided to put my money where my mouth was, and so I did draft him. I drafted a couple of the players that I've been touting, so I'm really trying to own up to what I'm talking about on the show. But I think it's all good news for the Steelers, especially since their running game, and we'll get into it when we talk about their Week 3 preseason, but I'm not sure exactly where their running game is, and I know that there's been a lot of talk of getting back to a ground and pound type of offense, but I just don't think that's the case, and that's one of the reasons why I've been high on Antonio Brown, and Mike Wallace obviously helps that as a deep threat. And, Todd Haley, I think he's smart and adjusts. So if what they need to do is pass, that's what they do. So, do you see one receiver maybe sticking out over the other this year between Antonio Brown and Mike Wallace?
I actually do like Brown more, and frankly, Brown was better the second half of last year. I think Brown's a little bit more versatile. I mean, Mike Wallace really is a home run guy. So I like Brown, but I think they both. I think the Steelers, it's funny you say get back to ground and pound. I think a lot of people don't realize they've left ground and pound. They have not been a ground and pound team. They've been airing it out. They put up some good, the Steelers and the Giants both. People think historically run, smash mouth. That's not been the case the last couple of years. I don't know. I'm not as convinced the Steelers are going to go back to that. I think they're still going to throw the ball. I think Wallace and Brown both could be top 20 receivers, each of them in their own right.
Ray.
John.
little bit of a technical difficulty there.
I wasn't sure if it was me or you. So silence was golden. I figured it would give our listeners a chance to absorb the information.
And the wisdom of Judge Ray Jaffe just is so far beyond what you'll hear anywhere else that it does take a little bit of time to just let it sink in and slowly, just creep into your judgment cells of your brain, and so you say, this is the correct way to go. So I'm glad we had that break. And we were talking about Antonio Brown and Mike Wallace, and I think you mentioned that you're a little bit higher on Antonio Brown this year, that he's a little more versatile, and I'm going to have to agree with you. And on that note, and which, we really need to find some uncommon ground, right? Because we agree too much. It really doesn't make for good radio. But
I have no doubt we will find uncommon ground.
But I'll tell you what, let's take a 2-minute break, and then this is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, with Judge Ray Jaffe. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25,000. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and kickassfantasyfootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from fantasyjudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Listen up, fantasy football owners. If you want top quality, guaranteed authentic sports memorabilia, there's only one place to go. Prestige Sports Marketing. They offer autographed baseball and football jerseys, framed jerseys, helmets, bags, photos, and amazing artwork. They're 100% guaranteed authentic, so you can feel 100% confident. Check out Prestige Sports Marketing at prestigesportsmktg.com. That's prestigesportsmktg.com. And a promo code ESPN and get 10% off.
All right, everybody, we're back from Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and with me is expert fantasy judge Ray Jaffe. So we're talking about some news of note. We've been through a couple quarterback receiver notes, and we're going to have quite a few running backs to talk about. Let's go with a few quick ones real quick. Doug Martin was officially named the starter over LeGarrette Blount, and Ray, I'm the Carnack's coming back at me, and I'm going to say you're not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised. It's funny. LeGarrette Blount, hot topic last year around this time, coming off really a strong end of, 2010, but sort of really outside of a couple games last year, definitely disappointed. Doug Martin, the rookie, worked his way, earned the starting job. He's got the starting job, and if you believe Vincent Jackson that Josh Freeman's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL, you should look for a big year from Doug Martin.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if that's the case, and we were pretty high on him last year, but I think we've tempered that enthusiasm a little bit this year. So, the only thing that scares me about Doug Martin is he really wasn't that productive in college, and then all of a sudden he's bursting on the scene now. So, at least we know LeGarrette Blount has some of that in him. He had a great year 2 years ago. So, time will tell. And, obviously always, I'm wishing for the best for everyone. I'm not really wishing for anyone to to do poorly, except for maybe T.O. But so we'll see. We'll see. And, I hope, Greg Schiano, I think, is getting things on the right track down in Tampa. They got derailed a little bit. So now I only hope for good things for him. And if Doug Martin's the guy, then Doug Martin's the guy. So more power to him.
Yeah, with rookie running backs as well, of all the positions where you come in, it is maybe the easiest position to just come right in as a rookie into, because the holes are there, and you'll hit them. The things that the rookies will fall down on, blocking schemes, things like that, hurts the team, doesn't necessarily hurt your fantasy value. If the hole's there, a good running back's going to hit the hole.
No, that's absolutely true, and you're right. It's pass protection that they have a lot of problems with, but LeGarrette Blount had problems with that as well. So, Doug Martin might be an upgrade anyhow, regardless of being a rookie. So I'm sure Greg Schiano knows what he's talking about, and hopefully Doug Martin will prove the naysayers wrong. So Doug Martin starting. Shane Vereen up in New England, he was expected to vie for a starting role, but he left the game straight with an injury, and so that leaves the door wide open for Stephen Ridley to get the bulk of the carries, as bulky as they get up in New England. But and he looked pretty good, and he can catch the ball in the backfield. So Stephen Ridley, New England running back, what do you think of him? And I know we've had discussions on New England as well, the running game, but Stephen Ridley, what kind of a back is he going to be?
I think he's great for the New England offense. He's the kind of back that you would think could get some real points. He's got a little bit of Kevin Falk in him, but maybe a better runner. I think he can catch the ball. Might give you a little bit more on the ground. It's funny every year. Some little part of me thinks Bill Belichick, again, proving he's the smartest guy in the room, is going to change everything, and he's just going to run the ball, and they're going to be a whole different team just to prove that he could win that way as well. I guess that little part of my brain sort of is shutting off. I don't think they're going to do it, but I do think Ridley will be the guy. I do think he's going to get enough touches to be valuable. RB2, possibly, absolutely a flex-type player.
Yeah, I think, he's got the tools. The problem is they just don't pass, obviously, as much, they don't run the ball as much because they have Tom Brady and they're doing a lot of passing. So it definitely cuts into the point production, but as an RB2, maybe low-level RB2, flex, high-level RB3, however you want to call it, I think he could do a lot worse than him. So I just want to remind everyone that we do have a call-in line, which is 877-511-1024. And please feel free to go in our chat room. We've had some active chats in the past couple shows, so go ahead, chat your questions, give a call on our call-in line. And during the week, we'll take emails also at www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. And if you get your questions in on the site, we'll get them in on the show. So, New England running backs, Tampa Bay running backs. Let's talk a little Detroit running backs. Jahvid Best is being put on the PUP. So he's out for, I believe it's 6 weeks, first 6 weeks. He can't come back in. And then the news, not surprisingly, is Detroit is trying to trade for running back. Kevin Smith got injured in their game. Michael LaShore got some suspension. So what's going on in Detroit, and what do you think can help, and does it really matter?
Well, it matters. They need a running back. Jahvid Best he should change his middle name to Pup, I think. I think he's going to be, that's just sort of forever his destiny, I think, is he's just not going to, I don't know that he's ever going to wind up being a real contributor in the NFL. He's had his flashes, but he's just way too injury prone. Kevin Smith had a nice return to the Lions last year, but he did get banged up. Like you said, LaShore out the first two games. I think they still would like to see LaShore when he comes back take the helm a little bit. Keelan Williams is on the team. They don't really have a lot of good options.
That's the best you can say about Keelan Williams. He's on the team.
Yeah, he's on the team. He's on the team, and what's crazy, he might be the starting running back week one. Unless they make a trade, I think they're still holding out some hope that LaShore can be the guy. come back off the suspension, maybe just get a temporary guy in there for a few weeks. I don't know. They need to figure it out. And what's interesting about it is whoever it lands on, if they can land on a guy that's the primary guy, Detroit's got such a formidable passing attack that the running back's going to have space to run. I mean, they could put up some real numbers. They just got to find a guy.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, folks. I'd love to be able to say I'm on the team. There's only a limited number of space on these football teams, and Keelan Williams is good enough to take one of them. So good for him. But as for fantasy production, he's not really one we're going to be talking about much on this show. But
now that you said that, John, guarantee 120 yards and a touchdown week 1.
Well, you did bring up a good point, though, Ray, that they spread the ball around so much that there's a lot of room to run. So if you have some ability, they make the holes, then running backs could find a hole and go through it. So it's definitely possible. I wouldn't take it to the bank, but you never can tell. So word out on the street is they're looking to trade for running back, which one of the things means is they're just not interested in anyone that's on the street right now, i.e. Ryan Grant. And I did mention, I believe it was on Thursday's show, that we talked about, we'll roll right into it, MJD. He's holding out. There was, mention of a trade. I think he's very open to a trade, and I was saying that, the number one team that should be targeted for him probably would be Detroit. They may, whether it's an offensive weapon or whether it's a cornerback or something, they may be able to provide to Jacksonville, and that would be a perfect opportunity. But I don't know that he will be traded. I don't know that Detroit will pick anyone up, but, what do you think about MJD? And will he be traded, or what's going to happen this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, you don't see blockbusters like that in the NFL. If he got traded to the Lions, my goodness, he goes, his already high fantasy value goes even higher.
He said there's no blockbusters. There was just a trade, Smith for Hunter. Hunter from the Jets, the backup tackle, went to St. Louis for backup tackle Jason Smith. I mean, so
I stand corrected. It's actually coming across the ticker right now on the national news. So outside of the historic and memorable Hunter for Smith trade, we don't see a lot. So just law averages, MJD will stay with the Jaguars. They'll figure something out. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, Jacksonville, outside of maybe playing all 8 of their games in London, they need to get people coming to the stadium. They need to put a team on the field that's an NFL team. They have all sorts of problems. Jennings actually looks pretty good. That's the only thing we could look at and say, well, Rashad Jennings does look good. Maybe they can move him and maybe they can get something real for him. Unlikely, though. I think MJD winds up being there at the end of the day. But Jennings certainly has looked good in camp so far.
Let's hear it. So Detroit playing in London. There you go.
Wow. Yeah. Crack staff with the that was impressive. I didn't know we had that in our arsenal.
We got lots in our arsenal. Also have lots on our website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. Weekly analysis, draft analyzer, lots of tools to help you win your league. So from now until August 31st, it's half price, $9.95. After that, you'll be paying full price, which would be $19.95, and which each subscription get a free cruise, and one fantasy judgment. So with an esteemed adjudicator to judge your fantasy issues that you can't solve on your own. So let's get back. I think MJD is there. I think Chaka Khan, their new owner, I think he's pretty stubborn, and he won't want to trade him because that would be giving MJD sort of a victory, and I'm not sure that he wants to do that. So I'll tell you what, Ray, we have a question in our chat room, and the question from Jay Green is, hey guys, what are the best sleepers for this year? And I know who your first name is going to be. We're actually just talking about their team So who's your favorite sleeper of the year?
You do know who it's going to be, don't you? That's impressive. If you thought I was going to say Titus Young, did you think I was going to say Titus Young?
I did.
I love Titus Young this year. Playing opposite Megatron. Megatron's on a different planet right now as far as attention he gets from the other teams, as far as game planning, as far as coverage. I think Titus Young is very skilled. I think Stafford continues to grow into an elite quarterback. I think he's a little bit of a off-the-radar guy who could be a tremendous second receiver. Without getting too crazy, think Randy Moss, Chris Carter. I think Titus Young could easily put up wide receiver 2 numbers.
I'm in perfect agreement with you. I think if he can control his anger issues, he's sets him off the field issues. I think he's someone that should be on every on the fantasy roster in every league, and I think he's going to Calvin Johnson's a beast, so he's going to get his. But as we've talked about with the running back problems, they need to pass the ball. I think Matthew Stafford's in for a great year. I think Calvin Johnson's in for a great year, and someone else is going to need to be. If Matthew Stafford's going to throw for 5,000 yards, and even if Calvin Johnson gets 2,000 of them, at least 3,000 yards for everyone else. So
that's right. Good way to look at it, John.
I mean, the yards are there, and I don't see why Titus Young couldn't have a 1,000-yard year himself.
I think he will have a 1,000-yard year. Actually, book it. He'll have a 1,000-yard year.
Book it. All right.
I'll give one more real quick. Throw out there. I'm going to throw out Evan Royster as well. I think he's going to wind up being the lead running back in Washington. I think the Washington offense will continue to improve as the year goes on, as RG3 gets his bearings under him. So I think if you look for sleeper, maybe a second half of the year sleeper, put Evan Royster on your list of guys to draft deep.
That's a bold call. I can't tell you you're wrong, and I couldn't tell you you're wrong until Game 16, because with Mike Shanahan and running backs, it's flavor of the hour. So yeah, I don't think Young is a sleeper anymore. Well, he may not be, but he's not being talked about amongst the league elite, and even probably as a number 2. And right now he's listed as number 3 on the depth chart. So I still think that is a call for a sleeper. So I'll throw Evan Royster out there then as a replacement for a little deeper sleeper there. Getting blasted by our loyal listeners. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a name, and this may not surprise you because I did draft him in our league, and just because I'm a little uncertain about Trent Richardson coming back. He's had some knee issues, and I
find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah, well, a rookie running back that's had, I think, 3 knee surgeries already, I think you got to be careful of. So I'm going to go with Montario Hardesty. I think he's looked good in the preseason. I think Cleveland has a good young offensive line. They're kind of road grazers. I think they have, a veteran rookie quarterback back there. So, Cleveland, they don't really have the receiving weapons, although there's another sleeper for you, and that's Josh Gordon, picked up in the auxiliary draft there. I think there could be some stuff that goes on in Cleveland, a little bit better of an offense. But I think I'd look to Montario Hardesty to pick up some yards, as expecting some absence of Trent Richardson. So are you saying that as a handcuff for Trent Richardson, or are you saying the Browns are going to do sort of like they're going to be good enough to have like a Foster Tate kind of deal where even their second back's going to, maybe rush for 700-800 yards this year? No, I don't think that. I think he will get yardage. There's 2 parts to this. I think as Trent Richardson gets back, they are going to ease him into it. So he will not get 25 carries a game. That being said, I'm not sure he's coming back right away, and I'm not sure he stays healthy. I'd be cautious of it coming off another knee surgery. And, he's a rookie. They've invested a lot of money into him. So if he starts getting hurt again, they're going to shut him down. They're going to shut him down for the year, let him heal fully, especially, they're not vying for a playoff spot unless they pull Cincinnati from last year.
Wait, his name's not Trent Strasburg, is it?
No. Strasburg. Come on, get it right.
Strasburg.
No. Yes. No, it's not. But it may very well be by the end of the year. So I'm just saying. Look for Montario Hardesty. So on that note, while I can say I'm right, there you go, Hardesty. That's a sleeper. Thanks a lot, Lockdown. On that note, we're going to go in for another 2-minute break. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and with me is Judge Ray Jaffe, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Hey, fantasy fans, how often does one or two injuries ruin your chances of winning your fantasy league? If you're anything like me, too often. What if I told you that I found a fantasy game that could help you avoid that? You can win cash prizes daily. FantasyPlayerExchange.com is a new fantasy game that allows you to make a team every single day. You can choose from players in multiple sports. Every day you have a chance to win. Unlike traditional fantasy games, FantasyPlayerExchange.com allows you to make your own team every day. Sign up today and enter to win a free trip to Las Vegas. FantasyPlayerExchange.com. Invest in your daily.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Judge Ray Jaffe is figuratively by my side. So
figuratively, yes. I'm there in spirit, John. There in spirit.
You are here in spirit, so I appreciate that. We're going to get into some of the games, and I'm going to throw a caveat out there, Ray. We talked a little bit about the vanilla defenses, and I got some numbers in front of me for the games that went on during the weekend, and I tell you, that's just some outstanding numbers. And so I'm really wondering what the defenses were throwing at them, just because it's except for maybe Arizona, some of these numbers are incredible. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about. We'll start off with Cincinnati and Green Bay. I mean, the biggest surprise, two big surprises. Aaron Rodgers actually ran for 52 yards. He got 2 touchdowns. Cedric Benson averaged over 6 yards per carry. And, by the way, James Starks is not recovering quickly from his turf toe and could even be a candidate for IR. So not much to go from the Bengals offense, but so what do you see? Would you see anything else sticking out from that game for you?
No, I mean, I think that Greg Jennings is back, so he's on the field. Everyone thought he was going to be back for Week 1 and ready to go, so it looks like he's getting his legs under him. I think the big story in Green Bay is Cedric Benson from a fantasy perspective. When they picked him up, a lot of thoughts he would wind up being the lead back. With Starks out, Benson performing well. Looks like he will be the lead back, and he is a back that will get goal line carries. So with the Green Bay offense, the way it can move the ball, I like Cedric Benson quite a bit, actually, as someone that's going to put up a significant amount of fantasy points this year.
Well, I do too, Ray.
Well, there we go again.
Yeah, well, putting my money where my mouth is. We actually have a caller, so We're going to go to the caller real quick, and so just hold on one moment. Let's see if he comes up. There you go. So, how you doing? This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. We got Judge Ray Jaffe and myself, Jumpin' John. How you doing?
Come on, Burlington County Brothers, man. It's Jersey in the house. How you doing for another year?
Jersey in the house.
Wow.
Hey, I just want to have you check my team. You know, it's 2 running backs, two receivers. I picked number 7 in that PPR league with the wacky thing, 10-point rushing touchdown quarterbacks. I took Brady in the first round, Forte second round, Matthews third, Jennings fourth, Cruz fifth. I got Davis, my tight end, 6th round, and I grabbed the 49ers defense 7th. Then I got Ridley in the 8th, and I got Bush in the 9th. Then I got Titus Young in the 10th, and then I got what's his name, Kenny Britt in the 16th round. So I got Hartley, Hanson. I think I'm pretty loaded. What do you think of the team?
Who was your first player you picked?
First player was Brady, Tom Brady.
Oh, Brady.
I had the 7th pick in the PPR league. You get 6 points for the touchdown, a point for every 20 yards passing, 4 bonus points for 300 yards, 10 bonus points for 350, 15 bonus points for 400, and you get 10-point rushing touchdown for any position, and it's a PPR league.
I think the bonus points really help out too with Brady because he throws a ton and he definitely will have a couple games over 350 this year. I like your team, and you got a Ray favorite and Titus Young. We just talked about Stephen Ridley, and as you know, Jersey, we love Bush. So book your championship, right?
I obviously love Brady. You said Jennings and Victor Cruz, your wide receivers.
I got Jennings in the 4th round, Victor Cruz in the 5th round.
I love your wide receiver picks. I think Jennings in the Victor Cruz in the 5th round is mind-boggling. How many teams are in this league? 6?
12.
Victor Cruz in the 5th round is mind-boggling to me. That's a steal. That's a steal. I think you have a couple questions that you're running. You have a couple questions that you're running back. I think with Matthews and Forte. Ryan Matthews always sort of has that injury bug plaguing him. Forte, I do think, could lose some goal line touchdown carries to Bush, but overall very solid.
Because I figure I might have to go Ridley in for a couple weeks. But I figure I got him in the 8th round, who could be a stud until Matthews comes back. At least it'll hold me over. You know what I mean? So that's why I wanted to think what you thought. Because, like I said, the backup to Kevin Smith is there, but he has a 2-game suspension. So I think I'm pretty solid. But I figure let me get your guys' thing. Castle's my backup from Kansas City. I can get the guy from Seattle, but who knows if Flynn's going to be quarterbacking by week 9. You know what I mean? So
I think you're well with Brady. Unless Brady gets hurt, obviously, whoever your backup is will never see the field unless it's a bye week. So Jersey in the house. I hope you're going to keep checking in with us during the year, and we'll talk football.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a nice holiday as the weekend comes. You guys take care and best luck to you guys, too.
You too.
Thanks Jersey.
Have
a great year.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye.
Now, John, football season has started. Jersey in the house is checked in.
Yes. I will say, well, he's definitely our most loyal caller. I won't call him our most loyal listener. He's definitely our most loyal caller. And so there you go. We also have some chat room activity, and we were talking about sleepers, and we got some more sleepers that I think there's some names to watch for. And so Jay Green was talking about David Wilson, Robert Turbin, and Jonathan Dwyer. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on the 3 of those, Ray. I have a few, but let's hear from you.
Well, Wilson has looked very good. Backing up Bradshaw. Bradshaw does have some history of getting injured. He, maybe is most effective as not a completely full-time back, so I think Wilson has some opportunity there. Turbin, obviously, has looked very good in camp. Now, Lynch, it looks like Lynch is going to avoid suspension for the DUI. It looks that way. So if that were to happen, Turbin is a no-brainer to step in. The way it stands, Lynch will be a workhorse, but, Turbin has certainly looked good and is the backup guy. Absolutely a very good handcuff if you have Lynch.
Well, I agree, and I'm not, I don't know about the suspension. It's still looming, but I would think we would have heard something more by now. But he has looked great, and with the way the Beast runs, you got to figure that he's a higher percentage risk for injury probably than most running backs. He's just full steam ahead all the time, and I like I like David Wilson, and I actually made a joke during the draft. Just wondering how long it takes for him to be the starting running back in New Jersey. So I think there's some great names, and Jonathan Dwyer, he could actually take over for Isaac Redmond while Mendenhall's out. So, and Redmond's nursing some injuries. So I think those are definitely three good running back names to stash in your roster and keep tabs on throughout the year. All right, so let's keep going. I'll tell you what, we're going to take this opportunity. Man, time is flying.
It is. You can tell the season's getting close. It's just you can't even. There's so much to talk about and go over. You just can't. That's why we have two more Kick-Ass Fantasy Football shows, Wednesday and Thursday night. You get a week full of fantasy football.
Well, we have a Wednesday show at 9:00 and a Thursday show at 7:00, and then there's a Sunday show. You were on the Sunday show, right?
I was from the Football Fantasy Fest at Convention Atlantic City. We broadcast live on ESPN Radio, and very exciting time. A lot of celebrities there, great turnout, lots of fun, lots of cool booze, cool ideas, advances in fantasy football. So fun was had by all.
Fun was had by all. Okay, well, fun will be continued to be had by Judge Ray Jaffe and Jumpin' John as we get back from this 2-minute commercial break.
Listen up, fantasy football owners. If you want top quality, guaranteed authentic sports memorabilia, there's only one place to go. Prestige Sports Marketing. They offer autographed baseball and football jerseys, framed jerseys, helmets, bats, photos, and amazing artwork. They're 100% guaranteed authentic, so you can feel 100% confident. Check out Prestige Sports Marketing at PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. That's PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. Enter promo code ESPN and get 10% off.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today. Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Hey fantasy fans, how often does one or two injuries ruin your chances of winning your fantasy league? If you're anything like me, too often. What if I told you that I found a fantasy game that could help you avoid that? You can win cash prizes daily. FantasyPlayerExchange.com is a new fantasy game that allows you to make a team every single day. You can choose from players in multiple sports. Every day you have a chance to win. Unlike traditional fantasy games, FantasyPlayerExchange.com allows you to make your own team every day. Sign up today and enter to win a free trip to Las Vegas. FantasyPlayerExchange.com. Invest in your daily fantasy.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevo. Judge Ray Jaffe is with me, and time is just flying by in this hour. And so we'll go down real quick and hit any of the highlights from the games, Ray, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's hit them. I mean, we got the game. Week 3 is the week that counts.
Week 3 is the week that counts. So we'll go Jacksonville.
Tongue-in-cheek, of course, John, but I mean it is where you see the most starters. You get probably your best information.
I would agree with that. So, and I like this information. Joe Flacco's airing it out. He had 2 touchdowns in about a half of play. Torrey Smith at 8 receptions for 103 yards. So I'm really liking that.
Yeah, it looked good. Blaine Gabbert, I think it was fool's gold. Frankly, the last couple of weeks he did take a step backwards. Justin Blackmon might be talented enough to actually get on a roster. Gabbert should not see your team.
No.
No.
Another person who shouldn't see your team is pretty much anyone. Well, I shouldn't say any quarterback from Arizona. Skelton looked bad. Cobb looked a little bit better, but threw 2 bad interceptions. Mike Fitzgerald still had 5 receptions for 91 yards. And a comment I made on the show the other night is, he's still going to get his numbers, and he damn well better since I drafted him second in our draft. But he's still going to get his numbers, even with bad quarterbacks. So still go ahead. He still had a great year last year, even with those 2 thrown to him. If he had a quarterback, he would be Calvin Johnson. But
and not necessarily a sleeper, but a guy we've talked about on the show, Kendall Wright, may be available in your fantasy league. If you haven't drafted yet, he could be a low-round pick. I would keep your eyes on him. Him and Locker seem to be in lockstep.
Well, I mean, he's a rookie, so he's probably a little bit off the radar, but I would agree with you. I think Chris Johnson's back, and so I think that only helps Tennessee offense. Philadelphia versus Cleveland, we talked about Nick Foles for a bit, and we talked about Josh Gordon as breaking out. He was in the supplemental draft, so he had 3 catches for 50 yards. And Miami. Anything to add for Miami?
Not really. They made the move to Tannehill, and he's frankly not looked very good the last 2 weeks. I think there's going to be continued growing pains in Miami.
But Atlanta's looking strong. So if you have a receiver, Julio Jones, Roddy White, even Gonzalez, go for it. Matt Ryan, I'm hoping, puts up the numbers that he's supposed to have been put up these past couple of years. New England and Tampa Bay. Doug Martin's the guy. Tampa Bay is not looking great on offense, and they just lost the Pro Bowl guard, Davin Joseph. He's out for the season.
And Ridley, we talked about. He ran the ball 16 times, which is crazy for New England. If he sees that number of carries during the regular season, you got yourself a keeper there.
Absolutely. Seattle, we talked about Russell Wilson against Kansas City. Looked great. Kansas City's not looking that good. One thing I did want to note: Dexter McCluster had 7 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. He is just a receiver, no longer sharing any running back duties.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, with Charles and Hillis, running backs are accounted for, but maybe McCluster is a guy to keep your eye on as a wide receiver, and check your fantasy league to make sure that he's eligible at that position. And we hit on it earlier, but probably the biggest breakout of the preseason has been Russell Wilson. Just another phenomenal game. He just keeps stringing them together. Absolutely.
San Diego versus Minnesota. Rivers didn't play. Gates didn't play. No one from Minnesota seemed to play. So only injury of note, Melvin Ingram, his first-round pick linebacker, he went out with bruised thigh. Giants versus Chicago. Actually, I mean, a lot of good fantasy value in here. Who's your favorite player on Chicago? Who's the one person you want from a fantasy perspective?
On Chicago, well, I do always love Bush. He really stepped up last year for the Raiders, and yes, our show's a big fan of Bush, whether it's Reggie or Michael or some other guy.
We could probably talk about Bush for an hour. What do you think?
We could.
Okay. So, but let's pass over the Bush for now and dig a little deeper.
Dig away, John.
Yeah, so who do you want? I actually like Matt Forte. Not that he's showing well in this game, but I think I'm going to go with Matt Forte. I like his catching ability out of the backfield. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I like Forte. I do think Bush can steal some touchdowns from him. I love Eli. I hate to say this as an Eagles fan. It pains me, but Eli Manning. I've ridden him for the last couple of years as he's sort of emerged as check the stats, really a top 8 type fantasy quarterback, and I see no reason that's going to change this year.
Well, I was trying to skip over the Giants on purpose, right? So thanks for
that. I know.
So let's move on. Washington versus Indy, battle of the top quarterbacks. Neither of them were great. Alfred Morris had 107 yards and a touchdown for Washington, but you still think Royster's going to be the man?
I do. I like Royster. I think he's the most skilled of their backs, and I think he's going to sort of emerge as the year goes on. Yeah, this was really the most hyped game of the preseason was Luck and RG3. And I think Luck and RG3, while there's a lot of talk about them, a lot of excitement about them, they're frankly QB2s at best, I would say. Guys that you would not be looking to start on any sort of regular basis.
All right, hey, we got a quick chat question. There you go. Yogun, 27's back. Haven't seen him yet, so he has a 16th pick in a 16-team, 1-point PPR league. So he's looking, what kind of strategy would you suggest? He's thinking running back. What do you think of the PPR league, Ray?
And he has this 16th. Well, that's a big 16th. League. 16th pick.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a strategy that's interesting, and the professor on our other show has been a big proponent of it, and you sort of see it in some of these drafts coming up. If there's a flex position, if you really want to throw a wrench into things, and they're available, ready for this?
Yeah.
Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham.
I knew you were going to say that. Yes. And I don't know. I don't know if they'll be there either. Gronkowski might be going in the top 16. So he's thinking, he's wondering if Lynch or Matthews or Charles will be there. And I can't type fast enough. I don't think Charles will be there at 16. I think Lynch will, and it's not a bad pick. And I think Ryan Matthews, with his injuries situation, has dropped down a bit. So,
I think Charles will be there. I disagree. I think Charles probably will be there. If of those three, I would take Lynch first. I would take Matthews second, and I would take Charles third.
Really?
I'm
kind of surprised at that. I mean,
I think Charles is going to lose some short yardage carries to Hillis, some goal line carries to Hillis, and as good as he looked coming into last year before the injury, I think he's got a little making up to do as far as getting back to that level.
All right. Well, and I definitely agree that he'll lose carries to Hillis. I think Charles is. He's always done more with less, but you're right. Coming back from the injury, he may need to catch up a little bit. So there you go. Let's get back real quick. Wow, we got about 3 minutes left, so we're going to breeze through these. Pittsburgh versus Buffalo. The aforementioned Antonio Brown had 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. So yay, Antonio. Chris Rainey, actually, I think he's someone you might want to keep in touch. He had 41 yards on 3 touches and a touchdown. It was more in the end of the game, but just something to keep an eye on. Detroit versus Oakland. Matt Stafford had an injury to his non-throwing hand. I believe he burst his blood vessel. So he did go out. Kevin Smith also went out. So just some nicks from Detroit to look at. Carson Palmer didn't look great. But Darren McFadden had a touchdown. So do you think McFadden's back? Are you concerned about his injury situation at all, Ray?
No, he's got some injury. He's injury prone, but he's a top 5 running back. He does it, especially in a PPR league. I wouldn't shy away from McFadden.
Dallas versus St. Louis. Tony Romo was on fire, 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. Here's a question for you. DeMarco Murray, some people even have him as a top 5 back. I think it's way too high for him. Felix Jones is actually looking pretty good. Are you concerned at all about DeMarco Murray? Is he the top 8 back? And are you going to, you may need to rely on him this year, but as you have him as one of your running backs. But, what do you think of DeMarco Murray?
No, I don't think he's a top 5 or top 8 back. I think he's a RB2. So I'd put him somewhere in the 14 to 18 type range. I think, frankly, there's a lot of backs that are going to have better years this year.
All right, so we'll have to mark that one. I will say though, St. Louis, I think, may have the worst secondary in the league. So I'm not really sure what that tells you. Houston versus St. Louis, Matt Schaub, he's ready for the season, as is Drew Brees. So that's really all you need to know from those 2 games. As they go, their teams go, and so do the receivers. San Francisco and Denver, Peyton Manning, 10 for 12 for 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think we'll be talking about him next week. So let's push any of those conversations off, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas and who's the receiver. And then Carolina versus the Jets. The best thing you can say about the Jets offense probably is they're not on the field that much.
I think they're still looking for their first touchdown this preseason.
they are still looking for their first touchdown. And Dustin Keller went out with a hamstring issue, and Josh Baker's out for the year. So, all right, folks, that's about it. We have limited time left, and I want to thank everyone for listening to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, and Judge Ray Jaffe, and thank you for your calls and your chats, and we'll see you next week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock.